Who were the slaves?
The slaves were black people who were captured in Africa.
Were the slaves sold for money in the South?
They were sold for money in the South.
What did Americans living in the North want to do?
They wanted to free the slaves.
Who was the young black woman that wanted to be free?
Her name was Harriet Tubman
Why was she beaten?
because she ate a lump of sugar.
Why did she return to the evil woman's house?
Starving, she returned to the evil woman's house.
What happened when the man hurled a piece of iron?
It struck Harriet's head, and she fell to the ground.
What happened to her for the rest of her life?
For the rest of her life, because of the blow, she will fall asleep without warning.
What did people enjoy watching Harriet do?
People enjoyed watching her lift heavy balls of cotton.
Did Harriet have many thoughts?
Yes, there were many thoughts in her head.
How would Harriet's strength help her?
It would help her in her flight to freedom.
How much did she want to be free?
She will find the road to freedom or die trying.
Why did the dangerous dash for freedom would have to be made immediately?
Harriet and her three brothers heard that they were to be sold and sent far away.
What is the secret escape route called?
The secret escape route was called the Underground Railroad.
How did the Underground Railroad work?
By day, runaways hid in houses and barns. By night, they traveled.
Did they make it to the Underground Railroad that night?
No, they didn't.
Who did Harriet remember?
She remembered a kind white lady who promised to help her.
Who was standing in front of the house?
A lady with a broom stood in front of the house.
Why was there suddenly danger?
On the road, three men were watching them closely.
What did the lady say to her?
She said, "Stacy, sweep this yard properly, you lazy girl."
Did the trick work?
Yes, the trick worked.
Who did Harriet hide with?
Harriet then hid with a family of freed slaves.
Who was she protected by?
She was protected by a group of people called the Friends.
Where did they drive her?
One of them drove her to the edge of Wilmington, a city in the state of Delaware.
What happened when Harriet had one of her sleeping spells?
She slid to the ground in front of a tree.
What awakened her?
Men's voices awakened her.
Was Harriet afraid?
Yes, she was very afraid.
Who was the black man crossing the bridge?
It was the runaway slave Harriet Tubman in disguise.
Okay, so the black man was a woman, right?
Yes.
What was Harriet's final step on the Underground Railroad?
Her final step on the Underground Railroad was at the house of Thomas Garrett.
Why was the sign special?
That sign divided the state of Delaware from the free state of Pennsylvania.
What happened 60 minutes later?
60 minutes later, a free woman stood on free soil.
What did she do during the next 11 years?
During the next 11 years, she returned to the South and helped other slaves to escape.
What are Harriet's 10 most important words?
Move and you will live. Stay and you will die. The Underground Railroad. 150 years ago, many Americans owned slaves. The slaves were black people who were captured in Africa. Slave ships carried them from their homes to the United States. They were sold for money in the South. Some slaves were treated well by their masters. Others were treated badly. The slaves worked in fields and in houses. Sometimes slave mothers, fathers, and children were separated. They were bought by different masters and never saw each other again. Many Americans who lived in the North believed that slavery was wrong. They wanted to free the slaves. There were also many slaves who wanted to be free. One of those slaves was a young black woman. Her name was Harriet Tubman. Over and over, she said to herself, "In the north, there are no slaves. I will escape and take others who want to be free with me. Never again will we belong to any man." Her first escape failed when she was only 7. Little Harriet was loaned to a crow lady. In the kitchen, she ate a lump of sugar and was beaten. Harriet ran out of the house. There was a pig pen nearby. She hid there and fought the animals for scraps of food. Starving, she returned to the evil woman's house. The woman sent the little slave back to her master. When Harriet was 13, she blocked the path of a man who was chasing a runaway slave. The man hurled a piece of iron at the runaway. It struck Harriet's head, and she fell to the ground. For the rest of her life, because of the blow, she would fall asleep without warning. When she was a young woman, she worked in the fields. Harriet was very strong. People enjoyed watching her lift heavy balls of cotton. Harriet felt like a caged animal. She appeared to be stupid, without a thought in her head. However, there were many thoughts in her head. They all concerned one thing: escape. Harriet vowed to put her strength to good use. It would help her in her flight to freedom. Harriet had heard about slaves who ran off. If caught, they were punished slavery. Harriet would not change her mind. She would find the road to freedom or die trying. Harriet and her 3 brothers heard that they were to be sold and sent far away. The dangerous dash for freedom would have to be made immediately. They whispered and plotted. Harriet had gathered useful information. She knew that there were good people in the South who helped runaway slaves. The secret escape route was called the Underground Railroad. By day, runaways hid in houses and barns. By night, they traveled. Harriet was ready to go. She whispered to her brothers, "Tonight." At last it was dark. Harriet's brothers waited for her in the woods. The 4 fugitives slipped into the forest. Before long, the 3 men became frightened. They decided to turn back. They persuaded Harriet to return with them. What would happen, they asked, if she suddenly had a sleeping spell? Although she was disappointed, she returned with them. Very soon after, Harriet Tubman decided to escape alone. One night, she slipped out of her cabin. She remembered a kind white lady who promised to help her. Harriet found the lady's farm. Her friend kept her word. She pointed the way to another farm. It was to the north. When Harriet arrived at the second farm, it was daylight. A lady with a broom stood in front of the house. Suddenly, there was danger. On the road, 3 men were watching them closely. Instantly, the woman handed Harriet the broom and shouted, "Stacy, sweep this yard properly, you lazy girl." Harriet understood the trick. The woman pretended that Harriet was her slave. Now the men were no longer just besides. They walked away. When night fell, the lady and her husband hid Harriet in his wagon. She stretched out under blankets. They traveled toward the north. Luckily, they were not stopped. Harriet then hid with a family of freed slaves. Some slaves had been liberated by kindly masters. In a few days, Harriet moved on. She was protected by a group of people called the friends. One of them drove her to the edge of Wilmington, a city in the state of Delaware. Harriet hid her face under a bonnet. Once again, they were not stopped. Harriet was now given new instructions. There is a graveyard near the bridge to Wilmington. Her friend said, "Hide yourself there. One of our girls will find you and point the way. The way to the graveyard was through the woods." Harriet was joyful. Soon she would have her liberty. Suddenly, she had one of her sleeping spells. She slid to the ground in front of the tree. Harriet went into a deep sleep. Man's voice awakened her. She leaned against the tree trunk and listened. Two slave catchers were on the other side of the tree. "We'll find that runaway family," one of them said. "Come on, Fred, let's look further." Harriet was shaking with fear, but the man never saw her. She traveled all night and found the graveyard. The helper appeared. Shortly after, a white man and a black man crossed the bridge to Wilmington. The black man was really a woman. It was the runaway slave Harriet Tubman in disguise. Her final step on the Underground Railroad was at the house of Thomas Garrett. Over many years, Mr. Garrett had hidden over 2,000 there for 2 days. Mr. Garrett then drove her to the outskirts of the city. He pointed. "Walk in that direction for 1 hour. You will find a sign. That sign divides the state of Delaware from the free state of Pennsylvania. Step past that sign, and your journey will be over. Good luck, Harriet Tubman." 60 minutes later, a free woman stood on free soil. Now no one could flog her or treat her like an animal. Harriet Tubman had won her liberty. During the next 11 years, she returned to the South and helped other slaves to escape. Harriet allowed none of them to change their minds and go back. They might be forced to battery the Underground Railroad. Often she repeated her 10 most important words to them. They were the words that gave Harriet Tubman's life meaning. Move and you will live. Stay and you will die.